Now let's get the thoughts of the royal editor, Robert Jobson, and senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Robert, what do you make of it?
No, it's a courageous move, and I think that people have been talking about whether it's constitutional, etc. I mean, as Prince of Wales, it doesn't really apply because he's the heir to the throne, but I think, broadly speaking, if you ask anybody, they'd say stop the fighting, but, stop the killing. But, you know, it's a difficult one because the royal family is supposed to be above politics. It's clearly a political statement. I think that the UN vote, Britain abstained in that vote, didn't they? So you're in conflict with to a degree with your government. But look, I think most people would agree now that talking has got to start, but and the killing is appalling. But that doesn't mean that really this is his role. That's the role of the elected government.
Well, it seems to me it's a bit like sixth form, isn't it? You know, you go, stop the killing, just stop killing each other. And it's all very well, and everybody goes, well, that's great. But it doesn't really work like that, does it? I mean, Rafe, he could have said, stop the killing in Yemen. He could have said, stop the killing in Sudan. He could have said, stop the killing in Myanmar. He could have said, stop the killing between the drug cartels and the police in Mexico. He could have gone over to Sudan. He could have gone anywhere you like in the world. He could have gone to Ukraine, closer to home, and said, stop the killing. But he didn't say stop the killing. He said, stop the killing in Gaza, because it's trendy, it's the right-on thing to say, and everybody's going, oh, isn't it great?
Well, there's a degree of truth to that. Important to say, he hasn't called for an immediate end to the fighting, say, like the Labour Party is now calling. He said as soon as possible. So that doesn't necessarily say that Israel must stop its plans, just that these things must come to an end, you know, as soon as they can. And had His Royal Highness said this 2 months ago, it would have been very contentious. But, you know, the narrative and the mood in the West and amongst Israel's allies has shifted over the last 2 months. So you now have America, of all places, and Australia and New Zealand and Canada all warning Israel not to proceed with its Rafah offensive. So in that context, I don't think His Royal Highness is necessarily that much out of lockstep with the Western zeitgeist.
Oh, I don't think he is.
But importantly also, Rishi Sunak today also said that he also hopes that the fighting will end soon. And of course, we now have it confirmed that, as you would expect, that this was all done with the knowledge of the Foreign Office and therefore of the government, as it has to be. And remember, his team that works for him are very competent. They include former government advisors, but also this new private secretary being brought on, Ian Patrick, was actually involved with peacekeeping. He was private secretary to Lord Paddy Ashdown when he was the UN High Representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
My interest in this, with you guys, and certainly with you, Robert, is not whether it's the right thing to say. I don't think anyone really disagrees with what he had to say. It's why he's done it and why he thinks it's important that he did it and what he thinks he's going to gain from it. Because I wonder whether he was brought under pressure by some people who said to him, if you don't say anything, there's a problem. And that's why he did it. Because it doesn't seem to me that there's no point to it, it seems to me.
Well, he came out with a statement, didn't he, when the King issued the statement right at the beginning of this, when Hamas committed the atrocities. And they came out with a statement shortly after the King's statement then. I mean, obviously this is something he feels passionately about. He's been... But I think he's coming at it from the humanitarian angle, rather like, you know, when his mother said, you know, I'm a humanitarian over the landmines. He's coming at it from that angle, I think. Then obviously, it's much more... I mean, you know, this has been... It's an area where there's been no resolution, 2,000 years? So, I mean, to actually come up and have a solution is difficult. I mean, he has been to the West Bank and, you know, the papers jumped on that and saying he was peacemaker will. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is a complex political subject. And, you know, he has taken advice from the Foreign Office. I don't know if he's spoken... We believe he met his father, the King.
I was going to ask you if he spoke to his dad.
We don't know if this has been necessarily cleared by the King. It doesn't sound like the sort of intervention the King would necessarily make.
No. It seems to me that, you know, and I said this today, he's made no kind of missteps so far, Prince William, since he's become the Prince of Wales. He's done everything right. He's had to face up to the problems with his wife's health, with his father's health, with his brother. You know, he's done everything completely right. This seems to me the first time he hasn't quite got it right.
Well, the only thing I would say, Mike, is that this is a bit like, as you were saying, you know, it's a different narrative now to it was 2 months ago. I think it's a bit like walking through an open door in a way, pushing against an open door. This is the mainstream thought. This is obviously what the Secretary of State in the United States is trying to achieve. But no, I don't necessarily think the heir to the British throne throwing his two pennies worth in was going to make an awful lot of difference.
No, but it could come back to bite him on the backside, couldn't it, Rafe? I mean, if something terrible happens in the next, say, couple of weeks and Hamas commit another terrible, terrible slaughter, he's going to have to speak about it and he's going to have to react to it because he's now opened up the floodgates. He's now if he's a humanitarian, as I said before...
I don't think he's in any way
what is he upset about around the world? Is he only upset about what's happening in Gaza?
You're quite right, and that, of course, is one of the reasons why Her Majesty was so cautious and never actually did
she was brilliant, because she never got herself into this.
I mean, Her Majesty is exceptional for actually being the only monarch not to have interfered.
Right.
But, of course, previous monarchs who did that always did it behind closed doors, so they would try to influence the King George V and Irish Home Rule, but there were no public pronouncements. I mean, this was very balanced because, of course, we know that Prince William will also be going to a synagogue and discussing the rise of anti-Semitism. We saw a reference to October the 7th, Hamas and terrorism in that statement that he issued. So every effort's been made to make this as diplomatic as possible. But you're quite right. Once you set a precedent, people will ask, what about Yemen?
Yeah.
People will ask about other conflicts. And now there'll be an expectation almost for him to actually comment on any other conflict that may arise.
Yeah, there may be, but I think what he's done here is simply got people talking, and I think that's probably raising the debate again about what we should do. Our politicians, let's be honest on this, have been a bit mealy-mouthed. It's all to do with what's going to be votes they're going to get in the election rather than... And William doesn't have to necessarily worry about that. But I just think that the King was doing a lot of things behind closed doors before he had his diagnosis, and I think he would have been making a lot of progress with his Arab friends and the people that he knows in different parts of that world, and maybe just because of where the King is at the moment, not being seen optically, that William is stepping into a role and feels he needs to do that.
I just think he needs to be so careful because, as you said, the late great Queen Elizabeth II was brilliant at this. She was able to make little speeches at Christmas and she could encapsulate the way people felt. She genuinely did speak for the country. He doesn't speak for the country in this because there may be most people who think he said the right thing, but there's plenty of people that I've certainly seen support from on social media who think that he's wrong. He's wrong to have done it.
The moment you take a stance, you divide the population. I mean, that's the whole purpose and beauty of a monarchy, is that it rises above politics.
Exactly.
You can hate your government and you can love your monarch.
As Prince of Wales, as the heir, he's more in a position to do that than he is if it was the King in conflict with his government of what the government was saying. So far different. That's when you have a conversation.
Yes, but that's an important point
and when King Charles was the Prince of Wales, he was quite outspoken about certain things. But it's different. One thing to say that you don't like the carbuncle that is the National Gallery and talk about the Gaza Strip.
I think it is actually very diverse. But the reality is, though, with this one is that what is he saying? He's saying that let's just try to stop the killing. I mean, effectively, that's what he's saying. Yeah. He's talking about humanitarian issues. I think politically, he's 41, a little naive when it comes to these things, but maybe he'll learn over time. I think in this particular instance, the Foreign Office would have pushed him back if they felt it wasn't the narrative that they want to endorse.
Sure.
Well, and we know that he's deliberately taken on his father's mantle.
Yeah.
That was his father's wish as well. But of course, no one should think, or hopefully think, that when he becomes king, he's going to become an activist king. Just look at King Charles III, who understands as Prince of Wales, you have far more leeway.
Sure.
In 1994, the Prince of Wales spoke about, the evils of political correctness and the importance of smacking your kids on occasion, a very political statement for the time. You would never imagine him saying such a thing now.
Right.
You've got 200,000 people on the streets of London, and there's been a lot of protests about it. You've got a lot of people on both sides. The argument is, I think on this one, you've really got to stick to him. Maybe it's been lost in translation a little bit. I think it's the humanitarian side of things.
I get that. I get that. And I get that he's sort of channeling his mother and all of that. I just don't know what he's getting out of it. I just wonder if he's put himself in a position where now he's going to be open to a lot more criticism than he would otherwise have been. Because, I get that there's pressure. I just think somebody must have pressurised him to say, you've got to say something about this because everybody else is.
I actually think it's probably him sitting with Catherine and watching what's unfolding, which is an atrocity.
Right.
And probably thinking enough's enough. I don't think.
Is he next going to come out and say?
I don't think anyone's pressured.
No, but do you think he's next going to come out and say, I don't think the British government should be selling arms to Israel?
I don't think
because I mean, he's only
a very short diplomatic statement.
He's a short step away from that.
I would say what he's gone here is pushing on the. I am a humanitarian, and I believe that humanity would want the killing to stop. The reality is, in the real world, you know, we'd all live in harmony and there'd be no wars.
Yeah, exactly.
But
let's all sit around a campfire and sing Kumbaya. Maybe he can lead us in a chant.
The real world is a very different, more complex place.
I mean, I'm sorry to sound so cynical. I just don't think it was that there was a point to it. I think he shouldn't have done it, and I'm sorry that he did. And I may be the only person left in Britain that says that.
I don't think you are.
But, you know, I don't think I am, because I've usually got the pulse of the nation at the very heart.
I think there's a lot of people say, well, hang on, is this anything you should be? Is this something you should be getting involved with?
Yeah.
But clearly, this is a different time, and he believes, as Prince of Wales, he should be getting involved.
Yeah. Listen, we'll be talking about it for days, I'm sure. Robert, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Robert Jobson, Rafe, Heydel-Mankoo.